landscape. And I'm Susan Karasoff with the California Native Plant Society Yerba Buena chapter. We're going to talk about what are native plants and examples of native plants in the landscape, shade trees, ornamental trees, shrubs. I love plants with rhizomes because they can just fill a space. Structural resilience, that stiff foliage, gray foliage, grasses, ground covers, vines, and grasses. There are 6,000 native plants in California. We are a biodiversity hotspot on this planet, and so we're not going to cover them all. If you have any questions about some favorite plant that I missed at the end, we'll have plenty of time for questions. We'll talk about a year-round buffet with an emphasis on what grows in winter and summer and fall, because most California native plants really like to bloom March to June. And we'll talk about some native garden resources. So why should we plant native plants? Yes, that is a monarch butterfly, and that is milkweed, the only caterpillar plant for that lovely butterfly. Native plants evolved here. They evolved on our local soils, with our local weather, with our local fog and our wind. They're all adapted to droughty summers, except for the ones that are marsh and creek plants. The rest of them are very well adapted to that. And so that's one of the great reasons, or many of the great reasons to plant them, is that they're already adapted. No matter how weird the weather gets, they're ready. They're drought tolerant and they're friendly to wildlife. And they didn't just evolve here, they evolved together in plant communities. In San Francisco, we've got a variety of plant communities. We've got the northern oak woodland, we've got dune scrub, we've got dunes, we've got grasslands, serpentine grasslands, serpentine oak woodlands, we've got riparian, which is that fancy word for creeks, we've got marshes, we've got all kinds of different plant communities. And each one of them, those plants evolve together. And so they not only evolve together above ground so that they don't all have to bloom at the same time to feed their insect pollinators, they evolve together below ground. There is actually a series of mushroom networks underground that connect them all. And so those mushroom networks take a little sugar tax because they can't create sugars. And then they move water and nutrients between plants. And it's how little baby plants in an existing plant community can make it through that first summer. But since most of us are planting where we don't have an existing community of native plants, we really have to water that first summer to make sure that we get those plants into the landscape. But they're drought tolerant because when we plant them together, they create that underground network, and this way they can survive those summers together. Las Politas Nursery has got a really good set of information about the plant communities. They've also got a zip code lookup in terms of what plant communities were there before. National Park Service has got a lot of good information. And so it's very helpful to me when I look at planting in public spaces because I run out of space in my garden. It's helpful to me to know what plants were there before and how I can get those to work together. And not all plants will work in every situation. Not every client is going to want every plant, but depending on what your clients want, if you could consider starting with what plants were there before and which of those plants would be applicable to this design and that client's needs, and then add the additional plants that you need, that would help those plants survive our year-on-year droughts, because we're just going to get droughts every year. Not only do they survive the droughty years, but they're going to survive the wet weather year. So 3 years ago, when we got 32 inches of rain and San Francisco lost 1,300 trees and we had landslides, it's because we're less than 1% native plants. And so the plants that were there just weren't prepared for that amount of rain. We've had as much as 50 inches of rain historically since the rainfall was measured in inches. And so it could be much wetter than that. And again, those plant communities can really, they do really well when they're planted together for both the dry years and the wet years. So not only did the plants evolve together, but they evolved together with our insects and our wildlife. And so our insects depend on us. If we want to have butterflies in our landscape, we need to have the native plants that they evolved with. Butterfly adults can get nectar from just about any plant that's got it, but butterfly caterpillars evolved to eat the leaves that they co-evolved with. So as the monarch caterpillar needs milkweed leaves, all 1,300 of California's native butterflies and moths need the leaves that they co-evolved with. And there's a really interesting work that was done by Doug Tallamy. He was paid by the U.S. Department of Agriculture back in 2016 to pull the information together at the county level for every county. And so that's on the National Wildlife Federation database. But in California, we've got a tool called CalScape that I'll touch again at the end in terms of the resources. And CalScape's got the number and which butterfly caterpillars apply to every California native plant, all 6,000 of them. And so there is actually a hierarchy in terms of which plants are best for these caterpillars. Doug Tallamy had done that original research back in Delaware, where he's from, but now we have it for all of these different U.S. counties. And here in San Francisco, it's the willows, the local willows, the local oak, the local cherry, cottonwoods, currants, California lilac, the lupins. It's an astonishing number of different kinds of caterpillar species that we could have in the landscape if we had these plants in our landscape. The introduced plants, I, I love plants that feed people, so lemon trees, rosemaries, somewhere between 0 and 5 insects. And I ask that every plant in the landscape feed people, wildlife, or people and wildlife. And if it doesn't feed somebody, I really want to know what it's for. I I want to be surrounded by butterflies, and that's what we should have. This is August. Every day from March to October, when you walk outside, we should be surrounded by clouds of butterflies. And we're not because we don't have our native plants in the landscape any longer. So this is one interesting, sorry, I like Excel a lot, table, but this is another table. It turns out that of our 1,500 native bees in California, 600 of them need special pollen for their baby bees. So honeybees, they're not native here. Honeybees were imported from Europe and Asia and Africa. Great bees, they they are important to our agricultural work, but we have native bees, and when we have, there's been wonderful data done by Claire Kremen, who was at UC Berkeley, and she was paid to discover if native bees near agriculture areas help with pollination, and they do. There's an enormous boost of pollination when there are native bees nearby. And so I want my native bees. All those bumblebees, those are native bees. So we've got these over 600 pollen specialist bees. When the mothers or the mothers and aunties put together a little lunchbox for the baby bees, they need to have specific pollen in them for those pollen specialist bees. So this list with sunflowers and mock heather and gumweed and goldenrod and phacelia is completely different from this list. And that's why I ask you to really consider every native plant that you can shove into a project that's appropriate, that's native there and is right for that plant community, that you consider doing that, because we just feed an astonishing amount of wildlife with the plants and the plant communities that we've got. San Francisco Estuary Institute, which is a really fun resource nearby, they did a wonderful study that Google paid for called Reoking Silicon Valley. They did another study called Making Nature City to figure out how urban areas and suburban areas could support nature, because our agriculture tends to be monoculture, and so not a lot of insects get fed there. And it turns out you can support a lot of nature in a city. It's primarily native plants. It's the quality of the green space, having green corridors, even a container with native plants on the north-facing balcony will make a difference as the bees and the butterflies and the other wildlife go from place to place. Um, the quality of the green space, so fewer introduced plants, getting rid of those invasive plants, reducing the amount of lawn, reducing pesticide, and then really taking care of some of the large portions of our landscape that are important, lakes, aquifers, creeks, large trees to really respect those. Um, that report is available for free on their website, and it's really made a difference. In San Francisco, we are 68% paved, and so every plant we put in makes a difference. So I use iNaturalist too much. And so the green dots here are all native plants, either the ones that were originally here or ones that have been added by people. And the red dots, those are butterflies. Now, iNaturalist has been around for over 10 years. All those red dots, that's all we've got. That's 10 years worth of butterfly data. That's not very much. And so I want more. And it looks, because of the size of the dots, like we're well covered, but we're not. So if we close up, look closely into an area, we can see where we've added native plants or where there were some in our natural areas, and we can see how those red dots get associated with that. But we can see how many spaces remain that we could be adding more native plants so we could have more butterflies. Um, this information is all in projects. I've got one for San Francisco and San Mateo native ecosystems because so many of those plants and butterflies are similar, and a separate one for the East Bay for Alameda and Contra Costa County. If you join these projects, you have to join iNaturalist, then you have to join the project, send me a quick note, and just go, hey, promote me to admin, and then you can change that however you want so that you can do whatever you want with that. We've added some of the unfortunately federally endangered snakes and frogs and other wildlife in addition to butterflies, but more plants in the landscape, more native plants, more opportunities to bring that wildlife back. So let's take a look at native plants in landscapes. What kind of native plants might be available? Again, 6,000 plants, not touching them all. And just some information about what you're going to see. These little things talk about the number of caterpillar species. There's one that talks about those baby pollen specialist bees. Everything you're going to see is WCAL, so water use classification of landscape species. It's low or very low. If it's not, it's got that little water on it to say that that little raindrop to show that it needs a medium water, about the same amount as the lawn. And I am a big fan of long blooming plants. It's got to be 3 months or longer to get the little clock symbol. And we've got some that are just really long blooming. And so that's such a relief, certainly in smaller landscapes, to just make sure that if you don't have a lot of plants, you can still get a lot of bang for your buck in terms of flowers. And even in larger landscapes, it's really nice to have that continuous bloom. So we're going to talk about shade trees, ornamental trees, shrubs and hedges, those space fillers, stiff plants, gray plants, grasses, ground covers, and vines. Shade trees. So there's so many gorgeous oaks in California. Please consider choosing the oaks that are near to you. When you go to the Calscape website, put in an address or a location or a zip code, it will tell you which oaks are local. Here in San Francisco, our only local oak is the Coast Live Oak. We don't have that gorgeous oak there, the valley oak, the Corsus lobata. I have Corsus lobata envy, but we just have too much fog for those trees to be comfortable. There are maples if you want those gorgeous, fall color. There's redwoods. Those of you who can grow redwoods, that's wonderful. It's not right for every location, and they are going to need a lot of extra mist and water as the climate changes. So we end up sharing a lot of understory plants between the northern oak woodlands and the coastal redwood communities. And it's astonishing how many of those plants can take a lot of shade, how many of them have flowers, and how many of them are edible. It's a lot of fun. There are pine trees that are native to California. If you're going to put in a pine, please put in your local one. All those pine nuts are edible. They're not native here in San Francisco, so I actually don't know when they're edible, but I know that they are. There is a Northern California walnut. It does want some more water, which means it needs a little water thing. Sorry about that. Um, Walnut Creek, that's because they have walnuts in creeks. It's that's one of those instances where the name is really helping us, and that is an edible nut. Um, so big trees, lots of fun. If they are great for your landscape or great for your client's project, I mean, that they're amazing to have. And then so many gorgeous ornamental trees. So California lilacs and manzanitas come all both of those genera come in a bunch of different forms. They come in tree form and shrub form, and some of them are ground covers. And those particular names are associated with the tree forms for the California lilac and for the manzanita. Always, when you're looking at California lilacs and manzanitas, always look at what the soil requirement is. Almost all of them are very specific in terms of whether or not they need well-draining soil or or can tolerate clay. A lot of them can tolerate clay. Just please don't try to amend the soil. Get the right plant for that spot. Toyons are incredibly tough. Toyons can handle or are in 4 different plant communities. And I have discovered that if it's in a bunch of different plant communities, it's probably an extra tough plant. When you buy them in a 15-gallon, they're going to look like a well-behaved tree. If you buy them as a 1-gallon, they're going to be more shrubby. But boy, are they a tough plant. And those red berries are wonderful for a winter migrating birds. Those are red berries during the the winter holidays. And mountain mahogany, I mean, it's just got these gorgeous puffs of white. Why wouldn't you want to put that in a landscape? And so please consider putting in one of our native trees with pink flowers if that's what your client wants. Please avoid the eastern red buds. They need so much more water than the western red buds do, and the western red buds still need water. And and please put one of these in rather than a crepe myrtle. These are feeding our wildlife, and the crepe myrtle is not. Buckeyes are really great tree, very, very tough, bunch of different plant communities. The issue with buckeyes is that it is an entirely poisonous plant. Now, there are a lot of poisonous plants in our landscape, but this one, the nectar and the pollen will kill honeybees. So our native insects are completely adapted. They don't care. It just tastes spicy, but the honeybees don't do so well. So if you are putting in a tree near where someone is going to have honeybee hives, please consider avoiding that one. And we've got some really pretty deciduous trees that can take some shade and also have some color. And that's our blue elderberry, the California hazelnut, and the western hop tree. If you've got a choice between the blue elderberry and the red elderberry, please put in the blue elderberry. Not only can people eat those berries, but birds prefer them to the red elderberry berries. I had both in my garden, and the birds would just ignore the red berries and eat the blue ones. And we've got trees that are adapted to very foggy, very windy conditions. So if you are putting in a garden in dune or dune scrub condition and you've seen how much wind you get, these are the trees that can really handle it. And not only can they handle the fog, but they provide a windbreak for all of the dune and dune scrub plants that are hiding behind them. So hollyleaf cherry, that is a evergreen cherry tree. Gets pretty big, edible cherries, coast silk tassel. They're gorgeous. They look like they're already decorated Christmas trees. And the California wax myrtle, these are all just brilliant trees with fog and wind. So let's transition from trees to shrubs. California lilac, it's just so gorgeous. And so here are just some of the taller California lilacs that you can get. Coffeeberry is really fun. California lilacs evergreen, coffeeberry's evergreen, and it's got coffeeberry's got smaller flowers, but they're still really great for um, for pollinators to use as nectar plants in addition to being a good caterpillar plant. And so at least in San Francisco, our Recreation and Parks Department put in a lot of California lilac and a lot of coffeeberry. And so because they're, oh dear, it should have a long blooming note. They're relatively long blooming. I do see a lot of um, bees and butterflies nectaring on those. Now the bushmallow is absolutely gorgeous. It is a chaparral plant. A lot of these plants you can box hedge, um, trim up so that it looks like a lollipop tree or it stays in shape. Love the bushmallow, summer blooming, very tough. It will laugh if you trim it. I have it because I'm one of those people who loves pink, and my mother-in-law has it because she's one of those people who loves pink. And oh, it just I've had our neighbors' tree trimmers step on it and break it, and it just grows back. So just keep in mind that's not one of those plants that's going to accept being trimmed into a shape. The red berry will though, and it can take a lot of shade, as can the coffee berry. We do have a bunch of shrubs that can take part shade. The currant, there's a bunch of different kinds of currants applicable to different locations. But the golden currant, the California currant, the red currant, the pink currant can all take some shade. Definitely look and find out which current is close to you. Almost all of the currants in the ethnobotany book are edible. There's one down in Southern California, the Catalina perfume that has no edibility notes on it, and I haven't tried to eat it because I am not eating something unless I'm sure that it works. Yerba Santa is an important herbal medicine. Ocean spray can actually get pretty big. We're trialing it in a very, very shady space to see how it's going to work, but it will definitely at least do part shade. Malvarosa is gorgeous, evergreen. It's got those hibiscus-like pink flowers, very long blooming. It is a really tough plant, and I'm enjoying shoving it into very shady spaces and giggling. California wild rose can deal with a lot of shade. I will note that all of the California roses are extremely thorny. I have a bias against thorny plants, but I garden with some people who are willing to deal with that, and so far those are taking a lot of shade. Evergreen shrubs definitely get the lupin that is best for you. Um, some of our lupins are only adapted for sand, and some of the ones that are adapted for chaparral and for grassland will actually be invasive in sand. So just get the one that's closest for you. The penstemons all seem to want sandy soil. I have clay soil, so I keep killing it. Um, Blue curls are wonderful. So I'm, like I said, I'm absolutely okay if you are putting in a plant that will feed people and is not invasive. But in case you want to try a native plant that tastes a lot like rosemary, the blue curls have got rosemary flavored leaves. It's in the mint family. It's very tasty, and it will feed more caterpillars and more bees than a traditional rosemary will. Lots of different California sages. Consider starting with the one that's closest to you and then looking nearby. Um, yeah, please avoid sages from elsewhere. Just about all of the sages have got the California native sages have got leaves that you could use in Thanksgiving stuffing, except for hummingbird sage. It's way too fruity. When you go on the tour with me, you'll get a chance to smell and taste that. It's a great plant, but yeah, not for Thanksgiving stuffing. And California sagebrush, really tough. Some of these sagebrushes are only good on sand, and some of them can take a lot of different kinds of soil, so be sure to check. I am going to just talk about a few of our shorter shrubs that would be great in landscapes. Long blooming. Grindalea is amazing. It's an important specialist bee plant. and it's summer and fall blooming. I've seen it bloom all the way into January. It is just a great, tough plant. Get the buckwheat that's closest to you. Our buckwheats in San Francisco can only deal with sand, but the ones that are in the East Bay that are grassland, because ours are dune and dune scrub, the grassland buckwheats can take clay. Golden aster, wonderful, long blooming, summer blooming. Deerweed is great, important caterpillar plant as well as an important bee plant. The thistles are important. So thistles are confusing. There are invasive thistles, there are edible thistles, such as the artichoke, and then there are native thistles. So please put in the native thistles unless you are specifically putting in an edible garden. And manzanitas are amazing, just important winter blooming plants, and evergreen and tough. Now, I do love rhizomes. I plant in a bunch of public spaces, and I just need to have the plants expand. Possibly less good for someone with a client who wants a more formal landscape, but I love these things. So goldenrod, California aster, those are blooming right now and will continue to bloom for the next couple of months. Hedge nettles, wonderful. Some of them can take a lot of shade, and their leaves are the preferred leaf mint family member for the extremely cute mint moth. So I have 5 different mint family members in my garden because in theory I can eat them all. The hedge nettle leaves are a little thick and weird. They are edible, but the mint moths strongly prefer them and they're super cute. California fuchsia blooming now, very tough grassland plant. It'll just spread. Hummingbird sage, I was talking about that earlier. Yeah, don't use that in Thanksgiving stuffing, but it is edible. Spring blooming rhizomes can take some shade. The only one of our shades that can take sages that can take some shade. Yarrow, just a bulletproof plant. Grassland, multiple different plant communities will spread by rhizomes, spread easily by seeds. And bee plant spreads by rhizomes, spreads easily by seeds, and can take some shade, as can yarrow. So sometimes we just need to keep some wildlife or some people out of some areas. You want to keep them to a path. You want to have something, or some dogs. You want to keep them out of certain areas. So it's great to have something really stiff to just convince them to keep moving. So we talked about the roses. They're very thorny. The barberry has got sort of little prickly bits on the end. And then California lilac and the baccharis and the manzanitas and the coffee berries are all stiff enough that people will just wildlife will just stick to the path and find something easier or more pleasant to step on. A lot of pretty gray plants out there. Please don't use something else. That California sagebrush, the Artemisia californica, it goes everywhere. And the rest of them can use some sand. Coast silk tassel, it wants sandy soil, but it is this gorgeous gray tree already decorated for Christmas. All you need to do is put stars on the top. It's just great. And the you need a male and a female to get those gorgeous displays, but worth it. Some of the buckwheats are gray, so definitely if you're looking for a gray plant, check out your local buckwheat. And then there's these great plants called saltbush that you'll see on the tour with me, and edible leaves. They taste salty. There are big ones, there are flat ones. They need good drainage, but you can. I've got them in a clay location because that's what Rec and Park put there. But because it's on a slope, it's doing fine and they're living. We have all kinds of grasses. Take a look at the root system on that oat grass. It turns out that a lot of our grasses have got very deep roots. So if you've got a client who's interested in carbon sequestration, we get a lot of that from those, from a lot of our grasses. And then we also have bunch grasses. Some of our bees, 70% of the native bees nest in the ground. And a lot of those like to nest in bunch grasses because they're just tougher for birds who are looking for a little bee snack to get to. So we have a variety, and these are all easy to grow and very drought tolerant. All kinds of ground covers. No one needs a lawn. I'm done with lawns. You can by the way, you can mow the fescues. Where are the fescues? Right there. You can mow those. You can actually mow yarrow. So, other things when you just need something flat looking that will bring in some color and some wildlife. There's flat manzanitas, there's flat golden asters, there's flat sages. Yerba buena's flat, and it can take a lot of shade, and it's edible. That's one of our native mints. California lilac comes in a flat thing. Seaside daisy does. We've got a couple of different kinds of strawberries. The the chiloensis, the beach strawberry, absolutely has to have what passes for sun on the coast, and but the and it needs sand. But the Fragaria vesca can take any kind of soil, any kind of sun or shade. It's pretty great. And there's a couple of flat versions of the California sagebrush, which are just gorgeous. I've got that in my garden. All kinds of vines. I do want to point out there are non-native peas and non-native vetches that are invasive. So just please make sure to get one of our native ones. There's a couple of different kinds of clematis. One of them is super drought tolerant, that one, the chaparral clematis, and the other one is going to want more water. Um, the Dutchman's pipevine is important if you are planting for hummingbirds and your client is okay with something a little bit relaxed looking. The Dutchman's pipevine, very, very shade tolerant. It grows underneath oaks. And in fact, it absolutely has to have some shade where you plant it. It is winter blooming and it is gnat pollinated, and hummingbirds eat gnats as their favorite protein. So they don't just go after nectar, they do go after protein. And so if you want to have hummingbirds, have baby hummingbirds and hummingbird nests, you need some gnat pollinated plants like the Dutchman's pipevine. Plus, the one butterfly that it attracts is still in our landscape. It's got a lot of energy. It's bright blue, and we're trying to bring this back all over San Francisco. So let's talk about the all-year buffet. We've been focusing really on caterpillar plants and on bee plants, even if I've talked about a lot of other things. So we'll talk about the adult butterflies because they need that nectar, and bee buffets, hummingbird buffets, and edible native plants for people. And the special search term there is ethnobotany. Daniel Moorman's native native ethnobotany is a wonderful book and unfortunately out of print. So these native plant buffets are feeding our caterpillars. The caterpillars feed the ecosystem. Everybody eats. I talked about how important it is to have winter blooming plants and these summer and fall blooming plants. So what's blooming right now? The Grindalia, that gumweed, goldenrod, coyote bush, yarrow, golden aster. Really important to have those blooming. And then currants will start blooming in November and December. Manzanitas will start blooming in January, as will seaside daisy. So having those plants in the landscape really makes a difference. Everything in California wants to bloom, coastal California at least, wants to bloom March to June, because by then, if you're a plant, you know how much water you got. And so you know how many resources to put into your root system, which is going to keep you alive through the summer, through your leaves. And then if you're going to have any resources left over to flower and fruit or nut. I have watched the vine maple tree in my backyard when we've had drought years bloom have like 5 blooms. I can see it rolling its eyes. It's like, is this all the water I'm getting? Fine, you get 5 blooms. And then in good years, there's just little maple babies everywhere. So focusing on what blooms in winter and summer and fall really helps keep that bloom going. There should be something blooming in a garden in California, at least coastal California, when we don't get frost or snow. We should have something blooming every day. It's delightful for people, and it's really delightful for wildlife. Same thing for the bees. They need something to eat year round. We don't have the same bees year round, but I have seen queen bumblebees arrive as early as Thanksgiving, so late November. And so there's got to be something blooming in the landscape for them. And that tends to be currants and sometimes manzanitas and barberries. And so I really need to make sure that we have those. We've got some great plants that bloom in dunes and dune scrubs. So those are the sun cups, the woolly sunflower, and the seaside daisy. So keep those in mind when you're putting those in. And then we interestingly have a bunch of native pollen specialist bees that specialized on pollen from annuals. So most of the phacelias are annuals. The Clarkias, the Nemophilias, the Leia, the Meadowfoam, the poppies, the Abronia, the Morning Glory. We've got just a lot of annuals. And so adding colorful annuals to an initial client installation is a great idea. It helps feed those pollen specialist bees and make sure that we have those in the landscape. Hummingbirds. So hummingbirds are definitely generalist feeders. They can get nectar from anything, but I want to assure you that when you are putting in that pollinator garden, when you are having the caterpillar plants, the adult butterfly plants, the bee plants, that the hummingbirds get some love as well. And so when we talk hummingbird sage, truly I've never seen a bee on it. I've only ever seen hummingbirds. Manzanitas are important because we've got a bunch of hummingbirds that do not want to migrate. They can migrate, but they don't want to. They would rather have their territory and have something to eat every day of the year. And so that includes manzanitas and barberries as those early blooming plants, and currants starting around December. So really great to have in California fuchsia right now. Lots of edible plants for people. So the plants that I've got that I'm showing in January, these are all plants where you would pick the leaves. Um, that they're going to bloom later. They bloom in the spring, but their leaves are available year round. So sage, the violets, yerba buena, miner's lettuce, candy flower, which is a miner's lettuce relative. They all have delicious leaves. We've got native onions, all kinds of native onions, and like everything else in the onion family, they all taste different. So the leaves taste different, the flowers taste different. They are entirely edible. The flowers, the seeds taste different. And so it's just this wonderful way of expanding someone's palate. So if you've got a client who is looking for an edible landscape, if you would consider adding some of the native edible plants, thimbleberry is a raspberry relative that spreads by rhizomes. Very, very soft leaves, no thorns. I love that plant. Our strawberries, our hazelnuts. We've got native hazelnuts that are edible, native walnuts that are edible, the huckleberries, which is a blueberry relative, that's edible. Sunflower seeds are edible, yampa seeds are edible, poppy seeds are edible, although they will set off a drug test. Coyote mint leaves and flowers are edible, and we've got native cherries, native licorice, monkey flower savory, which is not a monkey flower, not actually savory, it's just very minty. So we've got all kinds of plants that could do beautifully in your clients' installations. So we have all kinds of resources. CalScape is the California Native Plant Society plant selection tool. And there's great sources for native plants that is also included on CalScape. CalFlora has got a little bit better information about what the exact bloom periods are. Got a bunch of native plant lists. And Doug Tallamy, whom I referred to earlier, I'll just refer to again because I'm a fangirl. So CalScape, it's great. All of our 6,000 native plants are in it, and the associated butterfly caterpillars. We are working on adding bee information. It's not quite there yet, but it will be. And then there's always information about what nurseries you can find this in. The Native Here Nursery is the California Native Plant Society East Bay nursery over by Tilden Botanic Garden. So if you haven't been to Tilden, it's amazing if you're in the East Bay, as is the Berkeley Botanic Garden. I will note that CalScape has got a 10-mile radius, so you always have to check your soil type. When I look, I'm 7 miles from the beach. And Calscape is always telling me I can grow something that has to have sandy soil. Did I mention I have clay? I can't. So just check on that. Um, and it's great to check on the range of a bunch of these plants. So many of them, so many of the plants that we've just talked about have got ranges all the way to Southern California. So when your clients are worried about drought tolerance and climate change, so many of our plants will be fine when we plant them together and give them like 1 to 3 years of water, especially if years 1, 2, or 3 have got a droughty winter. If they could give them 3 years of water, that would be amazing. If you look at, say, the Menzies currant, which is the plant on the left, and our California hazelnut, or should be the hazelnut, yep, on the right, you can see the difference in the north-south range. Toyans have got a long range. Blue elderberry goes all the way from Oregon to San Diego. We've got a lot of plants that we can do with that have long ranges and are going to be fine in climate change. Just keep in mind that some of them won't. And so if you are going to put hazelnuts in your landscape, which I do, I've got them in my backyard and in some of my public spaces, that they're going to need a little bit more help with climate change. So when you're looking at a plant community and you're deciding what to include or not include, definitely look at those ranges. Also, they've got that great, more precise information about when things bloom. And plant lists. So California Native Plant Society, Yerba Buena, we've got biodiversity resources, and we've got a bunch of plants. Plant lists, just because if I've had to look it up once, I'm putting it in a list. We've got a landscape design, softscape list, butterfly caterpillars, bees, edible plants, hummingbirds, long blooming, shade, colorful plant communities, sidewalks, and containers. And they're all available for free. You're always welcome to just print whatever you need off of our website, and same thing for Calscape. Santa Clara Valley's got a butterfly list. The East Bay Native Hair Nursery's got a butterfly list. So you can find out a lot of information from your local California Native Plant Society chapter's website. I talked about Doug Tallamy. He has written a bunch of books to help us understand how important caterpillars are in the landscape. Um, he's the one who did the research that says, he and his grad students, that it takes 6,000 caterpillars to fledge one nest of baby birds. And so that's why your birding friends and Audubon Society friends and Bird Alliance people are just as nuts about native plants as your Native Plant Society people. They want their birds. We want our birds in our landscape. They're part of how genetics gets moved around, and we don't want to be without them. We want to make sure that we've got birdsong for years. And so it's plant those native plants and the native keystone plants, the ones that support hundreds of different caterpillar species. Plant a variety of native plants. Plant for those specialist pollinators, those pollen specialist bees and caterpillars. Have if your clients would even consider having a space where some leaves are left on the ground, that puts nutrients back in the ground, and it gives caterpillars a place to roll up into their cocoons and not be found by birds, because butterflies are delicious in every one of their stages. So it helps hide them. Um, for plant cultivars, please look for the same leaf color and the same flower shape. So no double flowers, those red leaves. Some of the native plants have got native red leaves, but many of them are cultivars. Please don't use those. And avoid spraying any insecticide or herbicide or rodenticide. And build a conservation hardscape. Use motion sensors for lights. Use yellow LED light bulbs. Those seem to be less attractive to moths. And if you want birds, be sure to install a water bubbler. My best friend in Virginia has got 4 water bubblers on her deck. Advocate for native plants, remove invasive species, and when you can, replace lawn with those low-growing native plants. Doug Tallamy's group is called Homegrown National Park, and all of that information that he and his grad students pulled together is on the National Wildlife Federation uh, landscape organization's native plant finder. And it's interesting, they include the non-native caterpillars as well. For instance, that white cabbage, white butterfly from Europe, which is so often the only one I'm seeing in our parks anymore. Those can eat hundreds of different caterpillar species. They co-evolved with the brassica family and kale, and so they'll include the non-native um, caterpillars, even though Cowscape will not. We are the California Native Plant Society. We do free lectures and free hikes, and we do restoration, and we do advocacy, and we've got plant lists. And I'm doing a tour of Lombard Reservoir and Francisco Park on Sunday, October 26th in San Francisco. This is at 1 o'clock. Lombard Reservoir is an active reservoir for the city of San Francisco. It's managed by the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, in other words, the water people, and they are all in on native plants and letting us plant there. And that is on former oak woodland and grassland. So you'll see oak woodland and grassland plants. And then 4 blocks away, Francisco Park is on dune scrub. They're uh, they're mostly native plants. Their third landscape designer didn't give them full dune scrub plants, but at least there's some dune scrub plants, and you can get an idea of how things grow on sand as opposed to clay. Did I mention 4 blocks away? It's astonishing.
All right. Thank you.
So thank you for planting for caterpillars.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. I think we've got about 9 minutes for a Q&A session. I see Julia has posted a question in the chat, so we'll get to that. First, so you had shared a map with the native plants and the butterflies covering the San Francisco area.
Mhm.
What do you think is the problem with kind of having the plants with poor attraction, or let me see, what do you think is the problem? Plants with poor butterfly attraction, lack of green corridors for the butterflies to move between the green areas, or any other causes?
Yes. So unfortunately, we've got good data on that. Part of it is having broken up the landscape so that butterflies have to cross a bunch of concrete. Again, we're 68% paved, and so habitat loss is part of it. Habitat fragmentation, and then habitat loss, where we pulled out the native plants and we put in crepe myrtle and camellias. And they're pretty and they need a lot of water, and they just don't feed the caterpillars at all. And then there's pesticide use. And so it's primarily lack of native species, habitat fragmentation, and pesticide and insecticide use.
Okay. What are your book references for edible native plants from Sabrina?
Oh yeah, it is 100%. And unfortunately, it's out of print. It's Native American Ethnobotany by Daniel Moorman. Out of print. Go get yourself a copy. I bought it new when it was still in print, and it was $50, and it's the best $50 I've spent.
Okay, and from Mafe, do you have any recommendations for native bulbs? Like, where do you get them so we can incorporate them in planting plans?
Oh, that's such a great question. So, a lot of great bulbs. So, a lot of native nurseries will have bulbs, depending on where you are. Oh, another nice thing that Calscape will do. Please tell me I'm going down. Nope, this is wrong. So when you find the bulbs that you want, Calscape can tell you which nurseries have them. But bulbs include the onions, the Brodiea. Where are they? Brodiea's got edible flowers. Ethereal Spear has edible flowers. The iris bulbs are wonderful. So, and they're great in containers. And so it's a question of figuring out which one you want and then going to Calscape and finding out who's got it. I tend to buy bulbs in the East Bay because I can get that onion that I want. I love Allium unifolium and I want it everywhere. And so I can usually find it there. We're working on having, we have backyard propagators here in San Francisco, and so we're working on that. But you may also be able to find it at the East Bay Nursery, native here. Santa Clara Valley has got their own nursery, they may have it. So it's, and I believe they have their inventories on Calscape. So that's a good place to find them. And now is a perfect time to look for bulbs. I don't usually plant now because I am a terrible gardener, but bulbs you can put in now.
Okay. And then I see another question from Sabrina. Might need to ask her to jump on the chat, but I see an earlier question from any work like this in the North Bay area. I think that was with the in naturalist map. Sabrina, please correct me if I'm wrong.
So it,
Yes. Okay.
I
So
haven't done
yes.
that for North Bay yet.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know when I'll get around to it. But what you can do is go join the San Francisco San Mateo ecosystem one. Send me that quick note inside iNaturalist and go, hey, promote me to manager. Then you can copy it and just change the area reference to being the North Bay. There's a lot of the same plants in San Francisco and San Mateo, um, and really San Mateo County as there is in Marin, because I've done an edible native plant thing for Marin, and yeah, the pines are in there now. I don't have them, but you have them in the North Bay.
Okay. So is there a comprehensive maintenance handbook for native California plants
Oh,
from
that's
Adi?
such a good question. Las Politas has got very good information online. There are some books. I think it's California Native Plants in the Garden. Most of the books that are are strictly on California native plants include a section on maintenance. And so the important thing on maintenance is for as long as possible to leave those seed heads up because birds are coming in to eat the seeds. And a lot of plants do not want to be watered during the summer. And those are primarily grassland and chaparral plants. But Calscape will also be pretty specific about those specific plants. But any one of the plants that are dedicated to California native plants, any one of the books should be able to include a section on maintenance. It's a good
And
question.
then another question from Afe. Susan, what would be your advice for us to deal with the small sizes containers? Most native species are 6-inch containers, and the seasonality in nurseries. I usually propose only native plant palettes, but then I have to change them because they are only available in small containers or not available at all during the time construction begins or happening. Crying face.
Oh, that's so great. So when you know what your plant palette is and how many you need and what size, get that out to various nurseries for quotes. So there are Calscape not only includes the retail nurseries, but they also include Devil's Mountain and some of the wholesale nurseries, Pacific Nursery, and just the earlier they get a request from you, the better. Sutro stewards can take early nursery requests. Mission Blue Nursery can take something early. Let them know what you need and when approximately you'll need them, and they can provide that. I hope that helps. If that's not the answer you needed, let me know.
I think we've got 2 more questions I think we've got time for. Maybe this one's directed towards Laura and Susan. Will we be receiving a copy of the slides or a recording of the presentation?
A recording of the presentation will be sent to the registrants and be available on the chapter website next week.
Great. And then Susan, could you speak to the irrigation needs for native California plants, aka drip versus occasional deep irrigation? The last question.
So it depends. Deep irrigation's better. If drip is what you've got, drip is what you've got. Be extra careful with chaparral plants. We talk about planting similar plants with similar water needs together. It's why I like to do a plant community together. But once you've established your California lilac or your manzanita, it does not want summer, or your oak actually, it doesn't want summer water again. Wants that the first year. The transplant shock is pretty bad, but it doesn't want subsequent years. And those oaks, you can start watering as soon as October. And so some of the plants really would be fine with summer water all the time. Even the drought tolerant plants will be fine with summer water all the time. It's just certain kinds of native plants really need a dry summer. Did that help?
I think, well, we're at time. So if you have any further questions for Susan, you'll be sure to catch her at the next event in the series, essentially Plant 102, tour of essentially the Russian Hill area in San Francisco, October 26th. So thank you everybody for joining, and thank you very much, Susan.